let's have a little chat early in the morning. So, I was watching a video of a person who makes some very interesting videos, and I really enjoy them. And she had a person on her platform who is a psychic or a channeler or something like that. And me being a channeler and me being psychically in tune myself, I don't even like using that word psychic, but just for layman shit, let's just say me being energetically in tune and me being a truth teller, I can somewhat sense when someone is giving out real information. And the information that she was giving out, it was real. She was giving it from her perspective, from her own dimensions and her own reality, or whatever the case may be, and that's fine. It doesn't have to align with everything that I know, because we are all walking in our own realities and we're all having our own fucking experiences, and that's something that people really don't fucking understand. We are not all supposed to be alike. We're not all supposed to think alike. You get what I'm saying? So there are going to be conflicts. There are going to be, conflicts of information. It happens because we're all walking in different realities, different universes. We all have our own individual, reality that we're manifesting in and living in. So I get it. What she was saying, it doesn't even, I don't really even have to reference it too much because, again, that was her experience, But I have another perspective on that, not to downgrade or say that she was wrong, but to expound upon my own experience, because she was dropping some real motherfucking shit. And this was a white woman, by the way. It was a white woman. She was dropping some real motherfucking shit that really aligned with a lot of the things that I know about Atlantis and Lemuria. Okay? And let me say this, Atlantis and Lemuria were only two major civilizations that we know about. There have been many, 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 many different civilizations, but those two were the straw that broke the camel's back, because after those two civilizations went under, that is when everything really started to get fucked up. There was a lot of fucked up shit going on in the process of a lot of shit. And I don't want to copy off of her, but what she said is that Atlantis, started really, really dabbling in a lot of sinister shit. They started to have like a downfall. They were a race of war-like people that were more about technology and shit like that. And that really makes a lot of sense. This was all from her channels and her perspective and everything that came to her spiritually. And there is no right and wrong. I respect that. Because she was really pulling up some real motherfucking shit. Now, here is where I come in. I've gotten channels about Lemuria and Atlantis before, but I never really said anything about it because, some things, and I mean, I got these channels years ago, many years ago. I'm not going to say that I had a past life in Atlantis or Lemuria, which I probably did. I think I did, but I'm not going to focus too much on that. What I will say is this. I do know that whatever happened, from my perspective, Atlantis and Lemuria were not on Earth. See, that is where the shit gets lost in translation. That is where things are hidden. They hide information and ancient information about Lemuria and Atlantis. They mask it with things that happened on this planet, and they mix it up with ancient information from this planet, if you can say that, to make people think that it happened here. But the motherfucking gag is, and the tea is, Atlantis was Mars. Lemuria was Venus. Let me say that again. My perspective, Lemuria was Venus. Atlantis was Mars. And that is the conclusion that I came to once I heard this other channeler talk about and go into great detail about Atlantis and Lemuria. Now, I've always been fascinated by Atlantis and Lemuria, and of course they were black. They were black people. They were people of color, whatever you want to call it. You know, they were of color. Atlanteans were a war-like type of race. They were war type of people. And the reason I know this is because I've gotten channels about this as well. And I remember Brother Panic had spoke about this too on his platform at one time, about how they were a war type of people and how I think Malcolm X and Tupac came from that Martian war type of bloodline. When this person was talking about this channeler, she mentioned how Atlantis, their energy was more masculine. That the Atlanteans had more of a masculine energy, including the women. We're talking about black people now. Okay? And this all ties into what's happening right now. See, this all ties into some shit, some karmic shit that we may have created for ourselves. You feel what I'm saying? Because it don't matter where you at in the universe. What you create will follow you wherever you go. So she was talking about how Atlanteans were more masculine and they were more technologically advanced and savvy, where the Lemurians were more holistic. And I've read about this before. She's on point because I've read about this before and I've researched this before, and I understand the lifestyle that went on in Lemuria. So Lemurians were more, let's just say that they had a more androgynous nature. They were more balanced in their energies. You know, they were more like the gatekeepers, such as myself. They were more androgynous. They had an androgyny about them. Whereas the Atlanteans were more warlike. Have you all ever heard the saying, men are from Mars and women are from Venus? See, those little hints right there are telling you what the real motherfucking deal was, at least from my perspective, now that I look at things from a totally different perspective. After seeing that video, it just made me think. I said, oh, well, that makes sense now. That makes sense why this happened. So Lemurians, they were more about holistic things. They were more about Earth. Well, their planet. I don't mean Earth, but they were more about, healing, and they were more organic type of people, meaning they dealt with herbs and herbs and healing and shit like that. Y'all get what I'm saying? I don't have to be repetitive. Now, at one time, they were at peace, I guess with the Atlanteans. There was some form of peace, but you have to remember at some point everything deteriorates. At some point people are going to start maybe having issues with each other, And I'm not going to copy what she said, but it makes sense that at some point the Atlanteans felt like the Lemurians were more so of, they felt like they were inferior to them because the Lemurians were not really about all of that technology and stuff like that. They were a more balanced society because they balanced their masculine and feminine energy. Whereas Mars with the Atlanteans, they were more masculine. They really didn't tap into the feminine energy. Even the women that were there, they didn't tap into the feminine energy. They were more warlike. And that is why they had the mentality that they did. And that is why that planet is not in existence today. The whole story, this is my point, the whole story about about Atlantis and Lemuria, we're really talking about an intergalactic war that took place between Venus, aka Lemuria, BKA Mu, and Atlantis, Mars. And I remember years ago They put a little bit of information out years ago. It was on a major radio station here in the DC area. I believe it was 102.3 or 96.3. I don't remember which one it was. But I don't know if it was Tom Joyner. I don't know. But there was a lot of interest in Atlantis back in the early 2000s, late 90s. I don't know what the energies was. I don't know what the energies were behind it at that time. Excuse me, I'm sipping some ice water. I don't know what the energies were at that time, but there was some interest about that entire, mythology, or, the mythology of the lost continent of Atlantis. Now, at that point, I had never heard about Mu. I've known about Atlantis since the 1980s when I was a child, because I had a teacher named Miss Smith that would talk to me about, Atlantis and how there was a lost continent of Atlantis, but it wasn't really a lost continent. We're talking about Mars, and that is why there's so much interest on Mars. That is why there's so much interest of Mars. You see what I'm saying? Atlantis began to do all types of weird experiments with people and shit like that, from what I understand, and this is from even what I've read, not taking anything from that lady that did the channel, but I've read information about how they started doing weird experiments with people and animals, and putting animal parts in people, and all this type of shit. They started doing a lot of weird shit. These were niggas doing this shit now. We have to get out of this Pollyanna, mentality. Oh, black peoples, we just so nice. Oh, black peoples, we just so innocent. Oh, we just like to play with herbs, and we like to do no. We have a very, 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 very savage nature as well when it comes to each other. You feel what I'm saying? And I'm going somewhere with this, so stay with me. I'm going somewhere. Okay? I'm going somewhere. I lost my train of thought a couple of minutes ago. That's because this is spiritual. And that always happens when it's spiritual. So if you're talking about something and then you lose your train of thought, that's because it's spiritual. This is not coming from this is not the intellect. This is not the intellect. This is actually, I'm talking from the right side. I'm coming from the right side, which is wisdom, knowing, and intuition. That is the side that I'm coming from right now. Okay? Because this is a knowing. You can't find this in any book. This is a knowing. This is what's in my DNA. This is what I have seen when I've had outer body experiences. I don't even like calling them, astral, none of that. I don't like even calling it that, because that's different. When I've had outer body experiences, when I go to sleep, I have outer body experiences, really vivid ones as well. And I come back with information. The whole thing that happened between Atlantis, aka Mars, and Mu, aka Lemuria, BKA Venus, it was an intergalactic war. And it was so bad, the war was so fucking bad between us, that it decimated the life and the life forms on those planets. It did. It decimated it. Now, they always use a flood as I guess you can say, as an allegory or as a metaphor for the layman mind, so people can understand things in layman terms. But in actuality, metaphorically, what the Spirit is showing me is that flood is actually used to tell or to explain massive war, massive destruction. You understand what I'm saying? And for people's primitive minds at that time, and for primitive people, they really could not, I don't think they could really understand the terminology of intergalactic spaceships. And I've actually seen, I didn't know why I was seeing this. I actually seen the actual intergalactic war that took place. I didn't know. But we're talking about an intergalactic war that decimated Mars and decimated Venus as well. That is why Mars and Venus are in the position. That's why they're in the predicament that they're in now, because they practically they look really the same. To be honest with you, Venus, the atmosphere on Venus is full of acid and all types of shit. And there's even information that's coming out now. They're saying that Venus was once more like Earth. Okay. Okay. See now I know I'm onto something, because I just got a ringing in my ear, a very, very strong ring in my ear. See, that's usually when I know I'm on to something. See, the spirits are they like, yeah, you on to something, you right. So this war between the Lemurians and the Atlanteans was actually an intergalactic war between Mars and Venus. And the story ended up here on Earth. They showed you this in the movie Cloud Atlas, how stories from other planets can end up on a planet that it did not take place on. Now, I'm not disputing that there may have been some type of cataclysm on Earth, like a flood or something like that. I'm not disputing that, because we do have the epic, what do they call it? The Epic of Gilgamesh, and we have all of those stories. But I don't think that those stories are, I don't think they're in connection with, I know they're not in connection with the Atlantean story. Those are separate stories. Atlantis, from my perspective, was not even on this planet. But what I was going to say, now remember, back in the day, there was a on the radio show I was mentioning earlier. There was a radio show where they were talking about how, and they always put out little bits and pieces of information just to see how the public will respond to it. And they did a radio show here in DC about Mars actually being Atlantis. Now, I did not pay attention to that, at the time. You see what I'm saying? Now, this was back in the late 90s or the early 2000s, I believe. I think it was late 90s. I kind of think it was the Tom Jones morning show. I think it was the Tom Jones morning show where they were talking about this. They were saying that, could it be that Mars was actually the Atlantis that we are referring to, and that story could have taken place there and been transferred here to Earth and masked under, different other ancient stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh and all these other stories that we've become accustomed to believe actually took place. But what if they're actually talking about, which is what I know they are, but I'm going to say what if for the sake of whatever. What if they're actually talking about ancient intergalactic wars that destroyed planets? Because see, we have to understand something. The technology that they had back then was much more destructive than the technology that we have now. They had technology that could wipe out whole planets. Now, what I think, or what I know, I'm going to say what I know, but what I think, I'm going to say it that way so people can get it, is that right now, the United States is operating under an Atlantean type of fucking energy. Right now, we're operating under that type of Atlantean type of fucking energy right now, and we have been for quite some time. Because what they did was they found our ancient information. They found that ancient information, and a lot of times we think that they are, using the ancient Egyptian, and that can be mixed in with it too. We think that they're using the ancient Egyptian, civilization as the motif for this, empire that we live up under, this systemic oppressive empire that we live up under. We think that it's the ancient Egyptian, civilization that we're actually mimicking, but it's actually the ancient Atlantean one, mixed in with the ancient Egyptians as well. Because ancient Egyptian, ancient Kemet, and Atlantis are intertwined. A lot of that stuff that we read about Kemet is also from Atlantis as well. Because if I'm not mistaken, Atlantis predated ancient Kemet. because Atlantis came from another place. It came from Mars. Remember a few years ago, everybody was freaked out because there were faces on Mars. There were like a monumental old relic type of faces that were imprinted in the Martian soil. And there were also pyramids that they found on Mars as well. You see what I'm saying? And then all of that information, we collect that in our subconscious or our DNA, whichever one you want to call it. And that information, it follows us. It's like cell memory. That is why I know what I know, that Venus was actually Lemuria, and Mars was actually Atlantis. It wasn't even called Atlantis. Actually, it was called Atlantia. The real name is Atlantia, not Atlantis. Okay? And I'll leave room open for the possibility that maybe there was a section of Mars called Atlantia, but I'm going to say that the entire planet was Atlantis. Okay? I'm going to say that. But they were a war type of species. They were a war type of people. You know what I'm saying? And I know this to be true too, because I had a personal relationship with someone who was from that bloodline. I'm not going to mention the person's name, but people who know me, they know who I'm talking about. And, just examining his energy, I knew that, I said, oh, you're part of that bloodline too. See, I am more part of, I probably have had past lives in Atlantis as well, But what I do know is that I was there when the deluge, when that happened in Atlantis. I have seen, I guess you can say, flashbacks of me being there in Atlantis when that shit went down, or whatever you want to call that place. But what happened to me was, once the war or whatever happened, once it happened, I left this body and I ended up rotating around the planet in space. You see what I've seen that. That's what I experienced. That's how I know it to be true. Because I seen it, I experienced it. I went back to that time. I went back to that time of Atlantis. And then when I was in Lemuria, I can't even describe how beautiful it was. It was just so beautiful. Everything vibrated, everything was alive and everything like that. Everything that this woman was saying on that video yesterday or the day before about Mu or Lemuria was absolutely motherfucking accurate. And it really validated everything that I knew myself about these two places. But the only thing that's different, they were not on Earth. They were not on Earth. Now, if there was a flood, it took place on Mars. And there's even some information that there was some type of, if I'm not mistaken, these NASA people and scientists, they even say that there's even some type of historical proof based upon their scientific data that there was a big deluge or some type of massive flood that took place on Mars. You see what I'm saying? So if there was a deluge that did happen, it happened on Mars. And then that story got brought over to Earth. Remember I told you all about the Twilight Zone episodes, Probe 7 Over and Out. And then there was another one called Third from the Sun. And these were the old Twilight Zones from back in the 60s and 50s. Probe 7 Over and Out was about an astronaut who got stranded on a planet. The planet was Earth actually, but we didn't know that until the end of the show. He was stranded on Earth because his spaceship crashed. His home planet, they were at war with one another. They were at war with another, I don't know if they didn't really go into detail. I don't know if they were at war with people on their planet, but they were engaged in a war nevertheless. Let me just say that. They were engaged in a war. And he could not go back to that home planet. At the same time, a woman ended up on the planet as well. A woman ended up on the planet as well, and she could not speak English, or she didn't have the same dialect as he did. She spoke a totally different dialect. And They had to find a way to communicate. So his name, he called himself Adam, and she called herself Eve. You get the cliche and the symbology? You see what I'm saying? So symbolically, what they were trying to show you was that there was a war between Venus and Mars. They were trying to show you that in those episodes. There was another episode where there was another planet that we thought was Earth, but in actuality it was another one, and they were getting ready to have a war on that planet as well. And they had to travel in spaceships and go to another planet, which was the planet that they were coming to was Earth. See, Earth, they even had a show back in the 90s called Earth, the Final Conflict. And the reason that they called it the Final Conflict, on a symbolic level, the reason they called it the Earth, the Final Conflict, was because Earth is the final conflict, because Earth is the last surviving planet, I guess you can say, as far as the planets that can support life in this particular solar system, or whatever the case may be. Because it was only Earth, Venus, and Mars. Those were the only three planets at one particular time that could really support the type of life forms that they wanted to, that were able to have support. Let's just say that. I don't want to get all into that. You know, the other planets, they didn't support the type of human life that we have now. So it was only Earth, Venus, and Mars, and Earth is actually older, a little bit older than Venus. So this other Twilight Zone episode, they were at war as well, and they had to leave their planet and they had to come to Earth. So Earth is the final conflict, because Earth is where all of these different species come from. Talking about black again. The point that I'm making is this. As black people, we have a cosmic, universal, spiritual hatred for one another. And it did not start with white people. They just take advantage of the fact that we have it. They take advantage of it. I ain't knocking them. It is what it is. Ain't no anger, ain't none of that shit, because I'm looking at it from a scientific standpoint. I'm looking at it from an occultist standpoint. I'm looking at it from a spiritual standpoint. We have a cosmic, karmic, and spiritual and universal hatred for one another. And we have been having these problems with each other for many lifetimes, and millions and millions and millions of years. So it's going to take more than a Black Lives Matter, because truth be told, the work that black people need to do is inner work. It has nothing to do with white people loving you more. It has nothing to do with white people doing this for you or not doing this to you or whatever. I get injustice. I get that. I get fighting for injustice. Get that. No problem. But the real work that black people have to do is inner work, especially black men. Because the people that were on that planet Mars, that was masculine energy. Those were masculine, and it was women too. It was women too. But the Atlanteans, and it makes sense what this lady said, the Atlanteans did not have respect for feminine energy. Mars did not have respect for divine feminine energy, and that's why that planet went under. And then because they were so intimidated by the power and the force of the Lemurians, who you all would probably call the faggots, or the fags, or the fairies, because they were more in tune with both masculine and feminine energy. That is androgyny, my people. That is androgyny. So because they were so intimidated by that, and they did not want them to become a power source, they did not want them to rise up, because the Lemurians were more about, again, they were more about herbs and healing, and they were more of a peaceful race of people, at least most of them. They were more about peace, whereas the Atlanteans became more about war and technology and conquering. And they ended up destroying their own society, but there were some Atlanteans that did survive, of course. some of them did survive, and they started incarnating as certain individuals, black individuals, a lot of whom we see in certain parts of the entertainment industry. And I'm not going to even start naming names. I'm not going to start naming no names. I'm just going to keep that under wraps. I'm going to keep that where it's at. I'm not going to name no names. I could, but I'm not. So the hatred that we have for each other, this has been going on for millions, possibly trillions of years, because we've been here for so fucking long. We've had ancient battles with each other that we're still playing it out. We're still battling it out. That's what black on black crime, that's a rendition of everything we've been doing to each other since the times of Atlantis. That is why the so-called heterosexual black man hates the black faggot, me. That is why they are so much more more capable of showing compassion towards white homosexuals and indulging in white homosexual activity with white men, because they have such a deep-rooted hatred for gay black men in totality. Because what we call black gay men during the times of Lemuria or Mu, we were the ones on that planet running things, along with the women and along with other men who understood our energy, who did not. And I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about energy. Remember what I told you. We operate from the middle point, the medulla oblongata. We operate from the middle point. It's no just masculine or feminine with us. We are both. We are balanced. And that was the threat. That was the threat that Mars, the Atlanteans, that was the threat. They had an issue with us being balanced, because that balance produces power, and they use their technology to destroy not only themselves, but to destroy Lemuria, aka Venus, as well. Because remember, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We've heard that all of our lives. But have we ever really examined what they meant by that? There was something much deeper to that. They were telling us that there was an entire civilization of androgynous people on Venus. That is why they refer to Venus as Aphrodite, the black love goddess, or even Oshun. Oshun is the original Venus. And even in the mythology of Oshun, they talk about how the masculine deities threw Oshun out, and she took all of her sweet water and said, "Fuck you motherfucking niggas, and let's see how well you do without me. Let's see how well you do without me." And then everything began to fall. That is why everything is so fucked up, because after that battle between the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, everything got fucked up. And this channeler, she was saying that, and that makes perfect sense. See, I'm a good eye for truth. She was talking about it in her own perspective, but nevertheless, it has rings of truth to that, because I've had spiritual experiences and spiritual channels about Atlantis and Lemuria myself. And I have to tell you, it did not involve Earth. Mars was Atlantis, Lemuria was Venus. And they destroyed each other. Or rather, the Atlanteans destroyed the Lemurians. They went under. And then the Atlanteans were even at war with each other on their own planet, because there were people there were people in Atlantis who did not approve of everything that the other Atlanteans were doing. I mean, that's the case with any society. You know what I'm saying? There are those who approve of what people do, and then there are those that oppose it. And there were a lot of Atlanteans that opposed them going after the Lemurians, because they were peaceful people. But that is what black men do today. They go after gay black men and black women the same exact way, because they think that we're weaker, but in actuality we're stronger, because we're more balanced. And I don't give a fuck who that offends. You can get mad, you can get glad, you can choke, you can dump, you can fuck it, you can suck it, you can tuck it. I don't give a fuck. The point that I'm making is that all of this shit that we're going through, it's not personal. It's not personal. And when I say that we're more powerful, it's simply because we tap into more aspects of ourselves where you all are afraid to, because you're afraid to be called a faggot. And there's a difference between a faggot and a fag. I'm not a faggot. I'm a fag, honey. I'm a fierce ass God. I have purpose. I have consciousness. A faggot can be anybody. A faggot can be a man. It can be a woman. It can be anybody without any motherfucking purpose and without any fucking consciousness. So let's get it together. And I might make a video and go even deeper into that. Spirit showed me about that too. You feel what I'm saying? That is why I'm able to sit up on platforms with ultra heterosexual men like Panic and anybody else, because I'm balanced. I'm balanced, and I'm able to absorb whatever I'm able to absorb, and I'm able to fit in and morph in and to fit into any situation. That is what androgyny is really all about. That's power. That is power. Mars was Atlantis. Venus was Lemuria. And Atlantis destroyed itself, and in the process destroyed Lemuria as well, because they were so jealous. And they thought that the Lemurians were inferior to them in some ways, because the Martians did not have a respect for feminine energy. They were more masculine. They were warlike, and that makes sense. They were warlike because they weren't balanced in the way that they should have been. Just like we're seeing right now with everything that's going on with men and women now in this country. These are ancient battles being played out in another spectrum. It is what it is. Mars was Atlantis, and Venus was Lemuria. This is Sia Grant. Any questions?